Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. On the 16th of February, as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. And for many of you in the north and west, it's going to be getting colder and windier, meaning that wind chill value is going to go a lot lower. So, as always, we like to advise you of those situations and when those become dangerous. And a great way to know before we ever get to the Alaska Weather Show is to turn on your marine band or your NOAA weather radio and listen to the broadcasts there for your community. You can always go online, weather.gov/Alaska, or give us a call at 1-800-472-0391. Now, if you can't find what you need, you're not sure where to find the information for your village, or you just like to see some current temperatures for the area where you're headed to, you want to see a map, let us know. If you can't find that, nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov is an easy email to use, and the Alaska Weather team will be happy to help point you in the right direction or find someone that can answer the question that you have. No problem at all. Love to do it. Here is the hazardous weather outlook here, and you can see across Ambler and westward through the Kobuk and Noatak valleys, as well as a large portion of the Seward Peninsula around Cape Espenberg to Shishmaref and the western end of the peninsula, as well as St. Lawrence Island. The entire area is under an advisory. This is a wind chill advisory. Now, all the way through about noon tomorrow, we're expecting that it will feel like it's as cold as 50 below at times. Now, there might be a few places up around Ambler that it could feel as cold as 60 below. So it's going to feel pretty nasty cold out there, and dangerously so. So make sure that if you're moving around or spending any amount of time outside that you've got enough layers on and you limit your exposure out there, because it only takes a matter of minutes, maybe less, at levels like that to do some serious harm to your body. So take care of yourself, take care of your elders, take care of your kids, and make sure that you are being extra careful outside, with wind chill advisories again telling us that those it could feel as cold as 50 to maybe even 60 below at times through about noon tomorrow. Here's a look at the satellite picture, and here's something that's been kind of a constant for the last several days. There's a low pressure system there across Bristol Bay. Because the jet stream is so far to our south right now, this is more or less cut off of the main flow of weather. So this low pressure system is kind of doing its own thing, going where it wishes to go on its very own. And without any extra push from another weather system or kind of a draw in from another weather system, it's sitting there and spinning over Bristol Bay. The effects of this has been that places like Homer, especially up on the bluffs, saw 16 inches or more of snow in the last 24 hours. In Seward, we heard earlier this morning that maybe as much as 10 inches of snow has fallen, probably more since that report. And yeah, places on the Kenai Peninsula have seen a substantial amount of snow. And if that does not cover the snow that you have in your part of the Kenai Peninsula, please let us know. We would love to know that information. And we don't have a crystal ball that tells us that snow fell at your location. So go online, weather.gov/AFC or /Anchorage, whatever you prefer. At the bottom, just kind of scroll down to the bottom of the page there, and there should be something that says storm report. Fill that out. Let us know how much you have and give us a nice note. Say, hey, we love our weather people, or hey, you guys missed this one. All of that information really, really helps us out and lets us know that you're watching the weather. So this is all good stuff. The Kenai Peninsula again, getting this nice band of moisture slamming into it from the south and east, and places like Homer and Seward feeling the effects of that. Now, as we see this moisture slowly moving eastward, we also have some smaller bands of precipitation and cloud cover that are moving their way across the eastern Gulf. Some of that is going to work its way into northern parts of southeast tonight and into tomorrow. That could bring some light snowfall into places like Juneau and the northern Gulf. Out across the interior, not a whole lot going on right now. Things are fairly quiet. You can see the clouds breaking up as they pass over the Alaska Range, but if you're headed that way, west of the Parks Highway, there will be more snowfall in that region. And across the North Slope, more of a northerly flow developing there. You can see some of the clouds working from south to north, but on the west side of that, Northerlies are working their way down through the Kotzebue Sound region, the Seward Peninsula, and Norton Sound, and because of that and the constriction on that wind kind of making it go faster and faster, just like it's being squeezed through the rapids of a river, the wind is really going to pick up. That combined with the cold that's already present, it's going to give us a pretty nasty wind chill, and that's where that wind chill advisory comes in to about 50 to maybe even 60 below at times. The moisture's been working its way into the southern Bering Sea. You can see some puffs of clouds here across the central and western chain and the southern Bering, the Pribilofs, and all that contains snow showers as well, but a lot of that is mostly just really, really cold air. Areas of freezing fog up north, don't be surprised to run into that, and poor visibility at times, some brisk winds, but it looks like the main threat for areas south of St. Matthew will be some heavy freezing spray, so watch for that as the ice edge continues to head southward as well on that northerly wind. Here is the weather map with today's weather setup, and low pressure across Bristol Bay has a front moving south and east of it. That occlusion is working into the Gulf. North of that, a period of a stationary boundary or so on either side of that. We've got some colder and drier winds on the north side, and that warmer, wetter air is trying to work its way northward. Temperatures across south central and into southeastern Alaska have been considerably milder than what we've seen up north. In fact, there were readings up around the North Slope today that were pushing 20 to 30 below. On the south side of that front, we've got temperatures that are easily in the 30s and 40s, so a very stark contrast on either side. As we move into tonight, low pressure at 990 millibars will sit across the Alaska Peninsula, but if you look carefully from where we just were, that low's moved just a little bit to the east, and that's going to be the overall progression as we go through the next 24 to 48 hours. There's a very slow creep of this low pressure system gradually north and east and into Cook Inlet. A look out to the east and southeast coast shows showers of rain across the outer coast and just inland there, including places like Juneau and northern sections of the Panhandle. You'll probably see some scattering of light snow showers there. Across the northern Gulf Coast, rain mixed with snow. High pressure sitting just east of Tok and Chicken, and some of our favorite towns on the Alcan there, chipping away at the clouds. With that 1002 millibar high pressure system, you'll probably get some pretty cold temperatures tonight. Up across the Yukon Valley, all the way down through the middle and lower parts of the valley, snow showers are still possible, but a very fine edge to that. Just to the north, we start to get into that deep cold and that north and northeasterly flow whipping across the Bering Strait communities, the YK Delta, and blowing snow again becomes a possibility there, but certainly the wind chill is probably a greater factor there. As we get into Friday, low pressure starts to work its way into the Gulf and organizes a northern circulation here as well. So this is going to help draw snow from south to north over the Kenai Peninsula and all the way up to Susitna Valley and eventually into the Alaska Range. On the west side of that, snow showers are a little more likely into Bristol Bay, the Alaska Peninsula region, as well as the Central Chain. And we keep that cold flow coming down the west coast. So places like Nome and Unalakleet, Shaktoolik, Emonic, especially places right on the coast. That's where you're really going to feel that brisk wind and the results of a faster wind flow rather than what you'll see inland. But it will still be blowing inland as well. Across southeast, a better chance of snow showers as we get into the morning, especially for the northern half of southeast. Along the outer coast, rain and snow showers expected there. For places like Gulkana, northward toward Tok and Eagle and Northway, probably a drier day for you, a little more sunshine. Clouds spread north of Fairbanks. Most of that really is just going to be to your west. And it looks like through some of our favorite passes in the Brooks Range, clouds will try and spread in. You'll probably see more clouds throughout the day, but again, a very sharp contrast from what you see north to what you see west, and then down south you start running into a better chance of snow with that front parked right over the center part of our state. For Saturday, the front drops a little bit further to the east and south. Low pressure kind of falls apart up north, but we keep the circulation that was around Cook Inlet. That moves a little bit more to the south and east. So that's still going to keep some snow in the region around South Central and Kodiak Island. You can still see moisture making its way into the central and northern sections of southeast. The further south you go toward Ketchikan, Petersburg, Wrangell, Craig, Klawock, you may have some snow showers in the inner channels, but the further south you go, the drier that air is. So chances are that's not going to be nearly as widespread southward as you get into some of the northern reaches like Haines and Skagway, Juneau, Gustavus. Out across the central and eastern chain, watch for snow showers there around St. Matthew and the central Bering Sea. And the north coast around Chukchi Sea, you're probably looking at some snow showers throughout your Saturday. A slightly better chance for accumulating snow as you get into the middle Yukon Valley and into the upper Kuskokwim Valley. But notice all this dry air up north as well. Looks like we'll see a pretty decent, clear, dry, sunny start even for Saturday in through Eagle and Fairbanks and maybe northward as well. And that also means some cold weather during the night. Here's a look at temperatures today. As I said, pretty mild stuff for southeast, 30s and 40s there around Craig and Klawock. Saw temps in the low 40s there. Sitka was 39, the capital city, in the upper 30s. Hyder was 39 degrees. Haines and Skagway in the 30s and 40s today. Yakutat was 38, about the same in Cordova. Middleton Island saw 37, a sign that temperatures out here across the northern Gulf remain fairly mild. 32 around Valdez. And again, snowy day in Homer and Seward. 35 degrees around Homer today, about the same there in Kenai. 27 in Anchorage, 34 for Wasilla. And Palmer, not too much different this afternoon. Lower 30s around Talkeetna. We saw up around Gunsight Mountain, or Gunsight Pass, I should say. It was about 7 degrees today, so I threw that on there. 37 degrees for Gulkana. 22 around Northway. Up around Eagle is only 19. 18 in town around Fairbanks, and 30 for Healy and Fort Greely, so up above a little bit warmer. 7 degrees in Fort Yukon today, 4 for Arctic Village, and then you get up to AKwx Pass. Watch out, 17 below. Wow, big difference there. And the eastern Beaufort Seacoast anywhere from 5 to 10 below. And look what happens out to the west. You get into that change in the wind, and man, the bottom falls out anywhere from 15 to 30 below. Wainwright was actually 31 below today. Kotzebue, you're looking at 4 below. Kivalina was 14 below. Shishmaref 9 below. Wales and Tin City around 10 below. Savunga, Gamble about 5 below today. Nome 4 below. Unalakleet about 3 below. 4 above for Galena, and 9 around Russian Mission. 17 above for McGrath, so not too bad there. And 10 above in Bethel. Nunivak Island was 8. Around Bristol Bay, we saw temps in the 20s and 30s. Lake Iliamna 34. The Alaska Peninsula holding pretty close to 30 degrees today. Sandpoint was 30, about the same for Cold Bay and False Pass. 33 as you look at Dutch Harbor and Unalaska. The Pribilofs only in the teens today, and Adak and Atka both looking at temps in the 30s. Shemmy was 32. Now overnight low temperatures will stay in the teens and 20s for most of South Central. Another fairly mild night tonight. 20s for the Alaska Pin and most of the chain. Southeast 20s with the outer coast hovering in the 30s. Look at Sitka there at 32. Prince William Sound in the upper 20s. The Copper River Basin, including places like Glen Allen and Gulkana, may drop down into the single digits again. And once you go a little bit further north and eastward toward Chicken, Tok, Northway, Eagle, you're probably looking at temps between 5 and 15 below. The Fairbanks region about 5 below tonight. North of the Yukon Valley 10 to 20 below, and the North Slope 20 to 30 below, with Kotzebue Sound at 15 to 20 below there, 20 below in Kotzebue itself, 14 below in Nome, about 2 below in Bethel, with temps in the teens again in Bristol Bay. High temps tomorrow stay fairly mild in South Central. Most areas around South Central will be very close to freezing throughout the day. A little bit colder as you head inland toward the Parks Highway and northward toward Fairbanks. Once you get into Fairbanks, 18. Southeast in the 30s and 40s. Sitka could hit 43. Ketchikan closer to 44. The capital city in the upper 30s. The North Slope 10 to 15 below in most areas. About 5 to 10 below for the Kotzebue Sound region. The YK Delta, including Bethel, could be pretty cold. Now this is not minus 23 before you get too worried. This is minus 2 and then 3 a little bit up the river. 3 above in Nunivak Island, 17 above for St. Paul, and Dutch Harbor and Unalaska you're looking at 31. On the flying weather, IFR conditions continue for the North Slope as you would expect with the change of winds coming in. Looks like IFR in the morning there around Barrow and around the Susitna Valley, as well as Prince William Sound and the eastern Kenai Peninsula, parts of Bristol Bay and the central chain. Southeast starts off with VFR and should stay there through a good chunk of the midday hours, with MVFR setting in up north and hit and miss across southern interchannel regions and the Clarence Strait. IFR from the Prince William Sound eastward across the northern Gulf, and then MVFR stretching all the way through the heart of Alaska and northward toward the North Slope, with IFR across the Chukchi Coast and MVFR across a good chunk of the west. Here's your pass conditions. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass, we expect to see IFR in the morning with MVFR later in the afternoon. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, marginal conditions through most of the day. Rainy Pass, we expect to see a start with instrument flight rule. Windy Pass, looking at VFR conditions to start, but a change to MVFR as the day goes on. Isabel Pass, we expect to see visual flight rule through most of the day. It could be a little bumpy there. Mentasta Pass, looking to be VFR. A lot of sunshine that way. And Tenita Pass, VFR conditions to start the day. Changing a little bit in the afternoon to MVFR. Portage Pass, IFR, especially on the eastern side. That's going to pull back into Prince William Sound as we go throughout the day. So MVFR may linger in the afternoon there, and a change to MVFR Port Chilcoot and White Pass, we think, as we go through your Friday afternoon. It's cold. The surface freezing line south of the chain, the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, and hovering right over the central sections of southeastern Alaska. Here's the 2,000-foot freezing line south of AKwx. So the jet stream's way down here. That's allowing all that cold air to move into the region. So icing potential is a little lower, ranging from about 3,000 to 4,000 feet and below. With the moisture content across south central, we're going to focus on the Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, Cook Inlet out toward Shelikof Strait and Kodiak Island, the northern part of southeast, below 4,000 feet, and across the middle and upper Yukon Valley toward the south slopes of the Brooks Range, and also across the central chain tomorrow. Most of that is a low threat with light to isolated moderate right now. There's a jet stream way out of reach of Alaska. It is powering Pacific moisture toward the west coast of the U.S. San Diego right now is going to have one of the windier storms that they've ever had, it looks like. So that's how far south this system is. It's powering some pretty strong Pacific weather way down there. So our surface low pressure system way underneath this superhighway of weather is just kind of doing its own thing because the driving conveyor belt of weather is way out of reach. So interesting setup here. At 9,000 feet, here is our trough of low pressure, and you can see weak southerlies coming across the central and eastern Gulf into southeast. Broad southerlies through the interior, about 20 to 25, and northerlies across the west coast. No real change from yesterday, 20 to 25 there. About the same at 3,000 feet. Low pressure still in the same place. Light winds coming in from the south and southwest through south central in the interior, and rounding the curve across the north slope and allowing all that cold air to move right through the Bering Strait and all the way down to the chain, with light winds across the eastern Gulf at 10 knots. Turbulence, looks like the focus will be across those areas that are really into that north wind. The western end of the Brooks Range, the Noatak and Kobuk Valleys, the western end of the Seward Peninsula and St. Lawrence Island. You might get into occasional moderate there below 3,000 to 4,000 feet. Across the Alaska Range, below 4,000 feet, some chop through some of the passes, and around Kodiak Island below 4,000 feet and into parts of Shelikof Strait and Cook Inlet. Watch for some light to isolated moderate there. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back with your marine weather here in just a few minutes.
Venus misses Mars by that much.
Hey there, stargazers. I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm Dean Regas, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory. We're here to help you find your way around the sky. The planets of love and war are up in the evening sky tonight. I'm talking Venus and Mars.
These are the two planets that can come closest to the Earth, and they have a lot in common.
They're both round, rocky objects that circle relatively close to the sun.
Relatively, at least compared to the outer planets Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. But when you look closer at them, they present some startling differences.
For instance, Mars might be a good place to personally visit someday, while Venus, well, you'd die pretty much instantly on the surface.
And we have something really cool because this week, Venus will appear close to Mars in the sky. Let's go check them out.
Okay, we have our sky set to February 6th at 7:30 p.m. facing southwest. You can see the two planets, Venus and Mars, about a third of the way up in the sky. But which is which?
It's easy. Venus is the really, really, really bright one. It's suspiciously bright. It looks like a plane or a UFO coming in for a landing. Venus is about 46 million miles from Earth this week and getting closer each night.
Mars is the fainter and perhaps redder looking one up and to the left of Venus. It was a lot brighter back in 2016 when it was a lot closer to the Earth. This week it will be over 175 million miles away and getting farther.
Right now, Venus and Mars look to be about 5 degrees apart in the sky. But let's go back in time, back 2 months ago, to see how these planets looked in December. It's now December 6th at 7:30 p.m. facing southwest. Venus and Mars are still in the sky, but they're in different positions. Look, they're much more separated. In fact, they're almost 21 degrees apart.
This is what made the planet so fascinating to the ancient stargazers. They seem to wander across the background stars. Let's move time forward and see how this plays out.
Here is December 15th, December 24th, January 2nd.
Hey, look, there's a waxing crescent moon wandering through our planet pair.
Here's January 11th, January 20th, January 29th, and back to February 6th again.
Wow, those planets are moving. And as the days continue, Venus will turn tail and head away from Mars, and they will spread out once more.
We're going to visit Venus first. As we approach, we can see that this planet is about 7,500 miles in diameter, almost the same size as the Earth. It's often called our sister planet for this reason.
However, that is where the similarities end, because under a thick blanket of carbon dioxide clouds lies a battered, sweltering surface. Robotic crafts recorded surface temperatures of about 900 degrees Fahrenheit. Also, the air pressure under all these clouds would be so intense that they'd squish you flat.
I don't feel so good.
And finally, when it rains on Venus,
Oh no!
it rains sulfuric acid. So that would leave any visitor to Venus like James over there a melted, squished, acidy pile of goop.
Okay, I think we've shown them enough for Venus. What do you have to say we go to Mars?
Great idea.
Mars is a much smaller planet, only about 4,200 miles wide. It's much farther from the sun, so it's a lot colder.
Although our robotic visitors to Mars have occasionally recorded surface temperatures in the 70s, most of the time it's well below zero. And at night, oh man, watch out, it can drop to minus 70.
Still, out of the two planets, Mars is a better place for humans to go visit. And someday we may even establish a colony on Mars.
So, this week, look for brilliant Venus near ruby red Mars in the evening sky. They won't appear any closer than this until September and October.
When you look up and see them, you can imagine flying there and standing on the broiling surface of Venus.
Or being the first person on Mars and colonizing an entire planet. It's all there when you keep looking up.
With north winds in the Bering, it's no surprise that that sea ice edge has finally pushed further and further south. Here's St. Matthew. You can see it's wrapping around the east and west sides of that and still creating a little bit of a space on the south side. But it's also very close to St. Paul here, about 30 to 40 nautical miles before you start getting into the strips. And eventually, if this continues, the north winds will push more of those strips towards St. Paul. That still seems to be several days away. But if you're out and about and you want to give us a ship report and talk to us about the ice, please do. We'd love to get your observation. Go to weather.gov/anchorage/ice or tell your friendly neighborhood weather observer in the area. Across Cook Inlet, you can see the ice is still trying to poke its way there south of Clam Gulch and south of Kenai, but with the warmer temperatures that have been working in that leading edge of the thicker ice, it's kind of eroding just a little bit. Across southeast, winds are going to be light tomorrow for your Friday. Light in the inner channels, about 10 knots, even a variable wind in the Clarence Strait, and a southwesterly onshore flow around 15 knots with 10-foot seas in most areas. More of an offshore flow, those you get north of Cross Sound and out toward Cape Fairweather and Yakutat. For Saturday, winds diminish in the north and eastern Gulf, 10 knots there with a 6-foot sea. Southeasterlies coming up the southern outer coast, 10 to 15. And northerly winds pick up across the inner channels to 15 knots with 3-foot seas expected on Saturday. Not too bad. Across south central, southeasterly winds inside of Prince William Sound, 15 knots with a 3-foot sea. Look at the broad southerly flow coming up with that weather system, 20 knots and 9-foot seas for most areas there. Shelikof Strait, you have a southwesterly wind, 15 knots with 4 to 5-foot seas and northeasterlies in the northern Cook Inlet over the ice. For Saturday, winds really settle down and kind of change directions on and off throughout the day. So we're going to say about 10 to 15 knots in all areas. The strongest winds and most uniform direction will be over Shelikof Strait, 15 knots there from the northwest with a 3-foot sea, and light northeasterlies inside of Prince William Sound. Otherwise, 10 knots through Cook Inlet and Shelikof Strait, and about 2 to 3-foot seas there, and 5 to 7-foot seas across the north and western Gulf for Saturday. Across Bristol Bay, westerlies, 15 knots over the ice, northwesterlies across the Alaska Peninsula, 15 to 25, 5-foot seas in the Bering, and 6 to 8-foot seas across the North Pacific coast. For your Saturday, northwesterlies continue over the ice there in Bristol Bay, and from Castle Cape to Chignik, 6-foot seas on that northwesterly flow. 15 knots, a little bit more from the north as you head down toward Cold Bay, King Cove, and Sand Point, 4 to 6-foot seas on either side. Across the Aleutians on Friday, northeasterlies for the Bering Sea coast, 20 knots there with a 6 to 9 foot sea. A light and variable flow from Nikolsky to Unalaska, and the Pacific coast with 5 foot seas there, 6 to 7 foot seas as you head out toward the central chain. And north and northeasterlies for Kiska all the way out toward Attu at 15 to 20 knots with an 8 to 9 foot sea on Friday. That becomes stronger from the south and east as we get into Saturday, 7 to 11 foot seas as low pressure to the south and west starts to crank up a little bit, 25 to 35 knots there on Saturday. Otherwise, northeasterlies continue for the central and eastern chain, 15 to 25 knots with 4 to 7 foot seas across the Bering Sea coast and 6 to 7 foot seas across the Pacific coast for your Saturday. For the west coast, there's the north winds, and they're going to be cold. 25 knots in all areas over St. Lawrence Island. Again, watch for some brisk wind. Watch for heavy freezing spray on the south edge of St. Matthew Island. Remember, the ice is curling around here, so that leading edge for that freezing spray is going to be dropping south as well. St. Paul and St. George, 7 foot seas in the area, northerlies in the Kuskokwim Delta and Bay area, about 25 knots. Northerlies continue most areas on Saturday. A little bit of a shift to the northeast for St. Paul and St. George, 20 knots with a 5 foot sea. For the North Slope, northerlies across the Beaufort Seacoast, up to 20 knots, though, from Cape Lisburne all the way into the outer parts of Kotzebue Sound. For Friday, for Saturday, a little bit of a change. Winds pick up for the Beaufort Seacoast, 15 to 20, and northeasterlies come down the Chukchi Coast from Barrow into Kotzebue Sound, up to 25 knots from the north. Recapping tonight's weather. It's going to snow from south to north across Cook Inlet. That's going to gradually work its way northward throughout the late night and early morning hours tomorrow. There might be a few snow showers across the northern parts of southeast tonight and into tomorrow. A relatively clear and dry period for Fairbanks and Nome, but much colder weather out west with northerlies working down the west coast. Wind chill advisories are posted for many across the northwest coast, Kobuk and Noatak valleys, as well as the Seward Peninsula and St. Lawrence Island, because it could feel as cold as 50 to even 60 below. So be extra careful out there and make sure all your loved ones are bundled up and keep them warm. I'll be back again tomorrow with another look at your Alaska weather. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.